Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, election 2014, Republican candidates for Lieutenant Governor, and the big stories leading into the primary election. Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Mahealani Richardson, your host for tonight's show. Two candidates are vying for the Republican nomination for Lieutenant Governor. Where do these candidates stand when it comes to economic issues, social services, the environment, and education? Why are they seeking a position that has little power? Then midway through tonight's show, political analysts John Hart and Chad Blair will offer their thoughts on the races for U.S. Senate, U.S. Congressional District 1, governor, and other races taking shape. Insights previously announced that Democratic Lieutenant Governor candidates State Senator Clayton He and former newscaster Mary Zanakis would also join us tonight. Unfortunately, Senator He decided not to appear after incumbent Lieutenant Governor Shan Tsutsui declined our invitation, citing a prior engagement. We invite you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Tonight, the seating arrangement and the order of the questions was done by random draw. Now to our candidates. Elwin Ahu served as a district court judge before hanging up his judicial robes to become executive pastor of New Hope Christian Fellowship. He's currently the senior pastor for New Hope Metro and is continuing his education as a candidate in Fuller Theological Seminary's Master of Arts in Global Leadership program. Kimo Sutton has served on the Kuli'o'o Kalani'iki Neighborhood Board for 25 years and was a delegate to Hawaii's 1978 Constitutional Convention, as well as a delegate to the 2012 GOP National Convention. He's also an entrepreneur and CEO of the startup Diamond Head Renewable Resources. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and good evening.
And by random draw, Elwin Ahu, I'm going to ask you the first question. What's the biggest difference between you and your opponent, Kimo Sutton?
I think the biggest difference comes in the legal experience that I have. I was not only a district judge, but I was also a circuit court judge as well before I became a pastor at New Hope. And with that legal experience, I have the ability and training to be able to analyze, of course, the legal issues, but also see things in a broader perspective. As a judge, when you make a decision, it's not just for the case itself, but you're looking at how it affects future cases, other cases. The other big difference is my ability and my experience in working with people. As a pastor, we work with people all the time, every day, and we get to hear what their problems are. We get to walk with them through their problems and try to find a way of making do with a lot of times what they don't have. And some of these couples are just trying to make ends meet, and we're able to walk with them through that process.
Kimo Sutton, what do you think is the biggest difference between you and your opponent?
Because we're both wearing orange, I figured we had a lot of similarities, and we have a lot of other similarities, both being, GOP members. I have been a long-time member of the Republican Party, and from that, I've also run for office before. I've been elected as a delegate in CONCON in 1978, so I have a long, varied background. I also ran against Neil Abercrombie in '92, winning a primary from the Republican primary at that time to take on Neil. In fact, I was on this show that time to spend an hour, or the only debate we have, because he ducks debates as bad as the other two lieutenant governors for Democrat. But I tell you, I'm here to balance the ticket to help Duke win. With my experience running, I have seen that we can get Duke elected. We must get Duke elected. The reason I am running is to give Duke balance to the ticket with my background and my ability to bring in more than just a few of my favorite friends. I have a lot of appeal to the other side because of the balance issues that we have had in the past. Say that something comes up and somebody asks me a question like you will tonight. I have the experience to answer those questions. I was an hour on radio this morning with Elwin was a couple days ago, and we both are starting to get, that thing where you spend a lot of time answering questions. And though my issues are online and I've been putting that out to the community, the biggest difference between us is I've taken positions on issues and put it to the public.
Kimo, you mentioned that you run for office several times, 1992 for Congress, for example. If you've run for several positions, several elected positions, why should the voters elect you now?
Well, I think the difference is to show up how I can help Duke win. If I go up against a Clayton He or a Mr. Shansui or Mary Zanakis, you have to have some experience like this to be able to come up and say, okay, I can take on their personalities. I can come and take on their debate. I can work with them to make it look like we have a strong support for Duke Aiona. During the campaign, I can go to the neighbor islands and Oahu and bring our people together.
Now, when you're a political newbie, would you feel that you're qualified for the office of Lieutenant Governor?
Oh, absolutely. Because one of the roles of the Lieutenant Governor is to be a support for the governor. I've heard it said before, I was on one of the news channels and they said, well, why are you running for this office when it has no power? It has a lot of authority. You step in the place of the governor in the event the governor is out of town, he catches a plane, if he can't function in that capacity. And I think the responsibilities and experience that I have in the past has equipped me and made me available for that role. I work very well with Duke, and I'm assuming that Duke will win the election, and I work really well with him. We have a lot of similarities where we can complement one another in terms of leadership. The experience that I bring to the table not only is with the judicial background, but also as an executive pastor under a pastor at a church, and this church is quite large. Weekend attendance averaged about 10 to 12,000, where we deal with a lot of volunteers, staff of about 70 people. And working under a very charismatic and a visionary leader sometimes can be a bit challenging, but there's a lot of responsibilities in that second chair role that many people don't understand how to manage it well. And I've learned that over 12 years of managing in that capacity as a second chair leader would prepare me a lot for the lieutenant governor's spot.
You know, there's a lot of people who still scratch their head and they go, we don't really know what the lieutenant governor or the LG's office really does. So, Elwin, what would you really want to work on, your number one issue?
I think, first of all, we would sit together. I would sit with Duke and see what his thoughts are on what my role would be. Again, I come in as a complementary leader to him. He would deal with the major issues, and then if there are issues in the community that needs to be dealt with, which other lieutenant governors have done in the past, then I would work into that role there. There are several initiatives that I'm looking at already, and one would be creating a youth leadership commission where we bring together some pretty good youth programs that are already in existence, but they're working independently of one another. Can we bring them to the table where we can begin to cross-pollinate ideas, where we can develop our youth for the future? Many times we look at problems of today and try to solve the problems today, and we don't think about the things that are happening in the future. And we need leaders that are coming up. If we don't focus on developing leaders now, our young leaders, we won't have anybody in the future, and we'll face the same problems again and again.
Kimo, what would you want to work on, your biggest issue, if eventually elected lieutenant governor?
When elected, I'd like to assist, first of all, what the governor wants me to do. Also, he's come out with many issues, one against the houseless, as I like to call them, versus the homeless, which doesn't show a compassionate idea. The houseless need to be sheltered and be put into circumstances that they can actually get off the streets and the beaches. And with Duke's idea, helping them with the mobile courts that can send them to certain things in the agencies, because many of these agencies have to have a court order. We also need to look at where we're going to put more people in the future that need affordable housing. And Duke has come up with a new situation lately where he can say, okay, we can build these 2,100 new units, so let's do it. And most of all, what I'd like to do is assist Senator Sam Sloan, who's endorsed me, and others, to reduce the cost of living in Hawaii by getting us an exemption to the Jones Act. Now, the Jones Act, which people don't know about much, is a huge tax on people in Hawaii. What we do is we look at what the cost of a container comes to Hawaii. That would be about $8,600, $8,700. That same container going to Shanghai on non-US built ships is about less than $800. That huge difference right there in the shipping cost would lower our ability to have to just scramble all the time to make ends meet. If more and more people could buy more for their dollars being worth more, and that is not being high cost by about 65% of a living higher than the mainland, we could do so much better in this state. That's like an increase in your salary by 30% tax-free.
Kimo, you know, both you and Elwin mentioned Duke Iona's name quite a bit in just a few minutes that we went on Insights tonight. And Kimo, you actually have his name several times on your website, but the former lieutenant governor has remained neutral for this particular lieutenant governor's race. Kimo, what's your relationship with Duke Iona?
Well, Duke and I know each other. I first helped him in 2002 when he ran for lieutenant governor in the primary. And also, Duke and I have a good relationship for many years because he's been a basketball coach. And I always just say to Duke, you know, I'll come over and help you with your team's free throw shooting that we learned at Punahou to do so well. And he always turned me down, and we make jokes about that. But we are very, very friendly. And the idea of helping Duke is that he will win. Not that it is for me, not for Elwin, but we have to have Duke win, or else the state will continue along the lines that it has. Doesn't matter about the leadership in the Democrat Party. They still continue upon the same way of doing business.
Elwin, what's your relationship with Duke Iona?
Duke and I have a lot of similarities. Being born in Pro City together, we were also in law school together. We became judges at the same time. He practiced in the prosecutor's office while I practiced in the public defender's office. So we've had cases against each other, went to law school, became judges, and over the years we've become very good friends. We're not just friendly, we're friends. And although in the primary, you know, he can't take a position on either one of us, and that's understandable.
Did Duke Iona ask you to run for lieutenant governor, or did any of his people in his campaign ask you to?
No, he did not ask. And for good reasons. You know, he can't show favoritism one way or the other. But we've talked about different offices and different roles before in other elections.
Let me get to some of the viewer questions. Some people are calling in already. And Tom from Waikiki, let me get to the viewer questions right now. Tom from Waikiki wants to know, should religion be taught in public schools? And Elwin, why don't you take a stab at that one?
I think religion should have an option. I think people should have an option to have classes in that area. I don't think it should be a total ban on religion. Religion is a part of our history. Is part of American history, a part of Hawaiian history. And to say that we can't study religion because of a misperceived notion of a separation of church and state issue, I think is misguided. I think people should have that option.
Kimo, what do you think about that? Should religion be taught in public schools?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, having a moral fiber to be able to see the difference between right and wrong is a part of life that you really should have. Now, okay, saying that you're a parent and you want to opt out, saying that you're opt out of the Pono. At the same time, you have to have the ability to give some former students that know about religion, that have been grown up in schools that they taught religion, ability to help these students find their way. Now, they're called teachers, and a lot of teachers can help with a moral upbringing, but if they have some type of religion or the ability to have religion, that is to go to a place where they can actually study, that would be appropriate.
Elwin, as a longtime pastor, do you see any conflict if you were elected lieutenant governor?
Not at all. Not at all. People have raised that question. There is a conflict of interest, or there is a separation of church and state issue. Again, it's a misinformed comment. The First Amendment and the Establishment Clause was really to keep the government out of churches, not to keep churches out of the government.
How would you make sure that there is a separation of church and state?
Same as I would with any other issue. If it is a matter that involves, say, my church or any church that I'm very close to, you know, as a judge, we have to make those decisions. We have to make disclosures. If I knew of the attorney, I was friends with the attorney, or if I worked on a case, or if the case involved a client of mine previously, I would always have to make those disclosures. So it's nothing new for me.
We have another question from Catherine in Mahealani, and she wants to know if Kimo, you say that you'll bring balance to the ticket. Can you give clarity, an example of how you would do that?
Well, you know, I've heard my opponent say before that he had been asked to run for office before. And before this, until April, he was not a Republican, so I would assume Democrats were asking him to run. I am a Republican, and that balance needs to be shown as a group that is committed to the ideals, to our platform, to the way that we have put our GOP, our Republicans, in front of the state to be able to help you to decide that we're a better party and to Duke be a better candidate. To see what the Republicans are about, you have to read a little bit. You have to have people like us tell us you about it. Not just say that, hey, I'm going to be a great guy, vote for me because that's the way you did it in high school. You go out and read about issues. You read about what we stand for, and we'll be there.
Tom in Waikiki brings up the issue of a woman's right to choose. Kimo, do you believe in a woman's right to choose?
Well, when she goes out on a date, that's a right to choose. When she has a child within her that's not, in danger, I think that we have a right to have that child to come to full fruition, and if she wishes at that time, choose to have it adopted or keep it.
What about you, Elwin?
The child itself doesn't have that right to choose. So a woman, when she's in that position, I'm a true believer and a full believer in the sanctity of life, and that child is a life. And so to abort is, I think you have to weigh whose rights are you talking about? And when a child is within a womb that has no say in anything, I think it's unfair.
Gun control, a hot topic. Susan via email wants to know, explain your position on the Second Amendment versus state laws regarding gun control. Elwin?
I think the Second Amendment is, historically, it was there to help those who were, up in arms and to protect themselves. And I think when you look at today's society, it's gotten a little bit far over on the edge, where now we're using military type of weapons, automatic weapons, and justifying it under the Second Amendment. So I would draw some lines as far as how we apply the Second Amendment. I think it's a good amendment, but we can't just let it go, as we would say in Hawaii, buckle loose, and there's no control over that.
And Kimo, what do you think about that?
Well,
do you think there needs to be some lines drawn?
Well, there are very strong lines in Hawaii, and in fact, I think they should be drawn back. People in Hawaii cannot use it as a sport as well as other parts in the country. So if you look at what the restrictions are, they are horribly restrictive in Hawaii. And I choose to be, as I have my own rifles, I have my own pistol. The reason is I go out and I like to shoot. If I want to have a good time shooting, my wife likes to go shoot, our friends and other people that like to go out and shoot, we would be restricted by carrying those arms already in our vehicles. You just can't go down the street. But you go to states that have a carry permits, those people that can carry weapons, and you'll find that there's a lot less crime.
Kimo, some people want to know, for both of you, is there any issue that you actually agree with the Democrats, and that you would veer from the Republicans?
Let's see, agree with the Democrats. To a point of national security, I think that we need to agree on how we should not be attacked. We need to be secure. We have strong armed forces, and they need to be stronger. As the former Diana Inouye said, he would always back the military. Without him there and others, we are not getting that support in Hawaii. We need the military for our people here in Hawaii to have extra jobs. But the fact is, we're going to be dwindling those numbers by reductions in our military. And if you see what's going on in other parts of the world, we're looked at as being weaker. So I think that's to be stronger.
Elwin, is there any issue that you differ from your Republican Party that you would agree with Democrats on?
Not that I can think of right now. And I want to make a slight correction to what Kimo had said earlier about people asking me to run for office, and he's assuming that they were all Democrats because I did not belong to the Republican Party. There weren't Democrats that were asking me to run for office. I was never a part of the party because I was never involved in politics. I just watched from the sidelines and thought that the leaders that we voted, we could entrust to take care of the issues. But I'm seeing that it's really eroding, and that's why I'm stepping in. But it wasn't because of Democrats asking me. I had been asked to run for every office from the moment I had left the bench in the year 2000. Whenever an election cycle came up, people would ask me to run again. And it was never about, you should be a Republican or you should be a Democrat. And I think this election cycle, people are less interested about parties. They're looking at people with values that they can trust. Take away the party label. Who can we trust? Who agrees with the same values that we believe in? And that's why I'm running, because people have asked me, people who share the same values with me. And
Elwin, do you have a question for your opponent, Kimo Sutton?
No, I don't. I think
no questions? You wouldn't want to ask him any questions?
Elwin
No,
gets a
I
great
don't have
shirt.
any
That's a
questions
good
for him.
shirt.
Kimo, do you have any questions?
Yeah,
for Elwin?
I think that I have a good question. I love the shirt tonight. It's very bright. I was wondering who helps you get dressed because we both always see each other in good company, and I was wondering who helps you get your clothes.
I will wear whatever my wife buys, and it's hanging in my closet.
There you
Seriously,
go.
I'm giving both of you a chance to ask a serious question.
Well, I'd like to follow
any
up.
question on any
Well,
issues?
He had talked about a situation where he had become a Republican to run, but basically he ran in saying in February he was going to run, had a big announcement, had a big sign out. He had his followers there. And what happened, he hadn't joined the party till April. So that's about 3 months. And I was wondering, when you join the party and then run, that's usually the situation, not you go out and say, well, I'm running as a Republican and then join the party months later. I think that was a little bit of a miscue there. But otherwise, I have no dislike for Elwin.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know why that is an issue at all for a person who's first time in the campaign. I've asked certain individuals who had talked to me about running. They said they would help me to prepare, and the deadlines and the what have you, the applications, I left it entirely up to them. So when it was time to file, they would tell me when to file.
Let's talk about taxes. Elwin, is there any situation in which you would support an increase in taxes and fees?
I can't think of any that would require an increase. I think when we look at funding for different programs, we should look at where we can cut to make up the difference of what we need for things that are more important.
What about you, Kimo?
Well,
Any situation?
Well, one comes to mind that would be not that we would increase taxes, but we would have to pay right away, and that's called an unfunded liability. We have $24 billion unfunded liability, and that's for retirees. If it comes due, if it has a problem, if we have a real hard time, every single person in Hawaii would have to dish out an extra $14,000. What that means is it would come due and we pay. If you can't pay and you don't have enough money to pay your taxes for this specific unfunded liability, they'll take your house because that's what happens when you don't pay your taxes.
Christine via email brings up the issue of lowering the cost of living. What would you do or support to lower the cost of living?
Well, as I spoke before, we have an increased cost of living because of having to have American-built ships come from the rest of the country here to deliver our goods. Something comes from Asia, it has to go to LA and then come here. We have this huge cost of living because of that. If we could reduce the cost of shipping alone, we would have an extra 30% money thrown into our pockets again, and that's tax-free. Now, as to land, that's always what's in demand, and we have only so much land in our islands here. So that will be costly. If we get more building to go on for affordable housing and to get people that are in affordable housing that have enough money that don't need to live there anymore to get out so we can get more people in there, the affordable housing will then be able to be part of our economy.
Elwin, if elected, what would you do to lower the cost of living for those especially the middle class who are squeezed right now?
Yeah, I think you're looking at the Jones Act is one, of course, but that's a federal matter, and so we'd have to work very hard to convince the congressional team to get an exemption of the Jones Act because that affects everything. You're looking at also the so-called Affordable Health Care Act. That is going to add a lot more to the cost of living because it's not affordable. And if we take money from that and begin to apply it to other areas of the government, then we don't have to, maybe we can take a look at cutting out the GET tax, the excise tax on medicine. And, why should we pay taxes on medical supplies? I was in the hospital for a good 58 days this last year, so I know what high medical costs are, and I know what taxes do on top of that. And we say, well, how can we afford all that stuff? Well, we're wasting money in so many different areas. Let's take a look at cutting those areas.
Let's talk about healthcare since you mentioned healthcare. What would you do in a Republican administration with the Hawaii Health Connector?
I think we should kill it. I think they've spent, $204 million to get this thing going, and you have less than, the last count, 3% of people that are signed up for it, and it's just wasting more money to keep it running, more employment issues. You're actually causing a lot of the insurers now, like HMSA, to increase their costs.
And how realistic would that be? Despite a lot of vocal opposition, there are people out there who feel that the connector has worked for them.
Well, you have just a minority of people that are talking about that. I think when you're in state government, when you're in the executive role, you have to look at the bigger picture of things. And although some may be benefiting from it, of course, we need to find a way of getting them covered. We already have a statewide health insurance program where employers need to offer health insurance. And a lot of these guys who are not insured are not employed. So how do we help them to become employed? So now they're covered by the employer.
Kimo, do you agree that the Health Connector should be killed?
Actually, I was the first to come out with that and saying that at $24,000 in enrollees, per enrollee, that's the most expensive in the country, 40 times more expensive than the federal. And what happens when you're on the federal basis is you don't do the state connector idea. The state connector was pushed by Neil Abercrombie. He got 2/3 of the money, that's over $200 million, to start this connector. 26 other states have opted out. And what you do is, you opt out, you have to go back to the federal because they were still under Obamacare. And I call it Obamacare because he calls it that too.
Well, Kimo Sutton and Elwin Ahu, it's been a whirlwind half an hour. I thank you so much for joining us tonight, and good luck to you in the next few days.
Thank you very much.
Well, coming up, we'll talk to two political analysts about how the major primary contests are taking shape. Right now, please enjoy this message about how Hikino, the nation's first statewide student news network, is giving Hawaii students the opportunity to tell the stories of their communities and giving them skills to use for the rest of their lives.
I was never really confident about the skills that I have, but once I saw it in front of me on a TV screen, I felt, you know what, this is what I was meant to do.
Hikino is the first statewide half-hour news show, produced, written, and done strictly by students. Our students now can tell stories within our community.
My favorite story I've written about thus far is probably the Heather Juni archive story. It's a story I worked really closely on and actually wrote myself. Me, myself, I don't know a lot about archives, but what I did learn was the power of preservation is the same passion that I have in the power of preserving our Hawaiian language and our culture, which I'm really into.
These students, they live the story. They actually know that story in and out because they live in that community. And it's not just our community, but it's now these other rural communities, the students in Molokai, the students in Lanai, the students in Kona, all of these small little rural communities who normally wouldn't have a chance to tell their story now have the opportunity to show the world what's going on in their community. It's their story told their way.
If I want to do this for the rest of my life, it has to be that piece of my life. So by making PBS a piece of my life, it's given me so much. I can't repay PBS for all they've given me, but I can definitely keep producing stories that I know that they'll be proud of.
And every Thursday night on Hikino, which precedes Insights, you can see the amazing stories produced by Hawaii students. Welcome back to Insights on PBS Hawaii. In just over 3 weeks, voters will be deciding which candidates they think should advance to the general election. With us in the studio are two political analysts who will share their thoughts on how the big races are shaping up now that the top contenders have had joint appearances in televised forums and debates. And as always, we encourage you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Now to our guests. John Hart is the chairman of Hawaii Pacific University's Department of Communication. He is frequently called on as a media critic for regional and national elections and debates. And Chad Blair is a political reporter at Honolulu Civil Beat. He's worked in the news business for more than 20 years. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Hi.
Chad, you just saw the Republican lieutenant governor candidates on our air. What did you make of the debate?
Well, I heard about guns and I heard about God. I didn't hear about gays. I thought that third G was going to come up because the same-sex marriage issue is something that the Republican Party is opposed to. That is part of their local platform. And Elwin Ahu is a New Hope pastor. A lot of those folks turned out in force during the Senate and House hearings on SB 1, as we called it, the same-sex marriage bill. And a lot of them felt they didn't have their voice listened to. And so that's a reason why many folks, particularly Republicans, are running for office locally because they were upset about that vote.
That is a very careful line. John, why don't you talk about the Democratic side, Shan Tsutsui and Clayton He and Mary Xenakis?
Well, I think that LG race has got a lot more exciting than people thought. Sean was the governor's choice. Clayton is very well known, also posts very high negatives. And then you have a third party that always could be a spoiler.
Let's move on to the governor's race. John, the governor has pulled out of several forums, debates that were sponsored by AARP. What is this showing to the public? What do you think that says?
Well, the forums aren't televised. The televised debates are over. I think it was kind of surprising. The governor's people and Bruce over at AARP sat down. They agreed upon a schedule, so I was surprised to hear that the schedule didn't work because they agreed upon it in the first place. And the governor did well in the debates. So I was surprised to hear that the campaign decided they did not need any more. Disclaimer, former debate coaches, I believe debates are very important. They are our last best chance, even with the format issues I have, to see behind the ads, the speeches, the pseudo events. Anytime we don't have debates like we did in the governor's race and the CD1 debate, I think that's to our detriment.
Chad, do you think it's a strategic move by the governor's office to not give Senator David Ige more time together so people can look at them?
I'll say two things here. First of all, I think it was a mistake for Neil Abercrombie's people to accept those AARP Hawaii debates for them, including on the neighbor islands, in the first place. Accepting one I can understand, but remember, because of the governor's position on taxing pensions of seniors and his view that Medicare Part B should be changed as well, something very dear to seniors as well, I think they made a mistake. They made an even bigger mistake by then later pulling out of the debates. Having said that, I don't think Abercrombie won all three debates. And let's face it, David Ige is not exactly Mr. Personality. It is not his strength to be a strong debater. But I saw Abercrombie win that first debate pretty well, and then I saw David Ige hold his own. And by the third debate, which was televised statewide, I think the governor looked rather irritated. I think Ige was starting to get to him about leadership and about claiming, that he turned the ship around and people are paddling towards shore. So I think most of us will probably forget about it as the next couple of weeks go by, but it was a mistake to accept it and a mistake to drop out.
I noticed some clear differences. I mean, just having Governor Abercrombie here and Senator Ige here, they were pretty, not tame is not the right word, but there were clear differences between their first televised appearance and their second one. Do you think that the people behind the scenes said, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to get stronger on certain issues, John?
Well, absolutely. Of course, you get coached. Presidential studies, we don't really study, unfortunately, much below that on debates, reveal that the first debates tend to be more important. The governor, I think, clearly is a better speaker and a better debater. One person's bombast is another person's aggression. I would score all three debates for the governor, but that might not necessarily compensate for anyone who already doesn't like the governor, and the governor does have some high negatives.
Some political analysts are saying that Senator Ige is running as the anti-Abercrombie. Do you think that he's been able to clearly set forth his plan and his mission if he were elected?
Well, I would tend to agree. I mean, his pool is going to be the I'm not Abercrombie vote. I think it's a very legitimate concern to say that he has not established his own ground on who he is. On the other hand, governors are always unpopular. Abercrombie has issues, but Cayetano has issues, Lingle had issues. All of them got reelected too. So whether or not I'm not him is enough is a very open question.
Chad, the Civil Beat poll showed that Senator Ige was ahead of Governor Abercrombie, but in the history of Hawaii, an incumbent governor has never been kicked out of office. So
certainly not.
Is it possible?
Well, back in 1962, remember that Bill Quinn, the Republican, who was the first elected governor, remember he was the last territorial and then the first elected governor, he did lose to Jack Burns in the general election, a Democrat. But you certainly have not kicked a sitting Democrat out at the primary level, so it would be unprecedented. Let me just add something to what John said. There are popular governors running for a second term right now. Andrew Cuomo of New York and Jerry Brown of California. Both of them probably are going to win re-election. They've turned their states around. They're doing very good. There's something about Neil Abercrombie, after 40 years, you either like him or you don't like him. And the people that like him love him. And the people that don't hate him. And that's why they're looking at David Ige. What our poll showed was the support for Ige is soft. People do not know who he is, but people do not like what Abercrombie has done over the last 4 years.
But is it enough to elect Senator Ige, or is it really going to just be who turns out at the polls in August?
I don't think you can underestimate the amount of money that Governor Neil Abercrombie has. He has 10 times the war chest that Ige has. He's running ads, including this latest one where he's driving the cab. It's a pretty good ad, and it's a departure from sort of the standard ads that he was running early on. And then he had that Edgy Lee 15-minute bio piece, pretty mushy, but pretty effective in a lot of ways too. That is going to be a really tough thing to do. The other thing he's got is organization. He's got Bill Koneko, a great campaign manager, and he's got people on the ground. Very difficult for a state senator with little name recognition to knock off a sitting Democratic governor.
Chad, you mentioned TV ads, and is it just me, or does it seem like the candidates some of them are just doing more out-of-the-box TV ads, John?
No. Actually, you're the communication guy, John. I'll let you take that first.
I mean, there's songs and jingles, and you've got Governor Abercrombie driving the old cabbie. What do you make of that?
and you have Richie Valens deciding whether or not he likes Donna or not. It's I get pretty critical of TV ads. I do like the taxi one. As a rule of thumb, I think most of the ads I've seen are underwhelming. I don't see an ad that's really going to get traction like, spinning around and deciding, whether or not Willie Horton is here or not. So I really don't see ads making a difference in this campaign, at least the quality of the ads I've seen so far.
But isn't it just more about getting people's attention and getting the name out there?
It is. It's about branding. It's getting people to like you. I'll point to two ads that I think were particularly effective. Mark Takai, running for the 1st Congressional District, he's got one up there now featuring his kids, and they're adorable kids. They're like, "Dad, let me take over," and they step in front of the camera, the young girl and the young boy. That's a pretty nice ad. It gives a side to Mark Takai that you don't normally see, a warm family man. I will also mention Shan Tsui. I think probably the most talked about ad, at least from what I hear on the street, is how do you pronounce his name? Is it Shan? Is it Sean? Is it Satsui? Is it Tsutsui? That's terrific, and it does in fact help people get a good feeling about you, which frankly is the main reason people vote for someone, is because they like him or not.
Chad, I'm not going to put you on the spot because I know you have to write and you're still a journalist with Civil Beat, but John, are you going to call the governor's race? What's your prediction?
Well, I guess I'll give the disclaimer of today. Another, and who knows what happens between now and then. But today, Abercrombie.
All right. Let's move on to the Senate race. We just saw Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa and Senator Brian Schatz in another debate. What did you make of what was going on? Was it still like the other ones that we've seen before?
Well, I would, as a former debate coach, I would score her as having won all the televised debates. I think the non-televised debates, those were much closer, but that's like an exhibition game. Candidates are not showing all their weapons yet. I think she came out of the box. She was very aggressive. I think Brian was more aggressive in this last debate. I would still score it for her. The question is, what's the poll differential at this point? Schatz's people believe he's up by 17 points. If that is true, debates will not make up 17 points. If those polls are incorrect and this is a close race, then debates do make a difference. So, did she win the debates? Yes. Will it decide the election? Depends on the poll spread going into these debates.
Chad, don't you see a style difference between the way they debate as well?
Definitely, and I saw all 5 debates, including the ones in Hilo and the one in Lihue. And I agree with John on points and aggressiveness. Colleen Hanabusa, I think, scored a lot of points. But remember, Brian Schatz didn't blow it either. He was not ruffled. She didn't knock him off of his game. And if you happen to notice, he was very much focused on his talking points. In fact, he was looking down at his notes a lot. He was coached pretty well. He did not move from the message, and I thought that was effective. But Colleen Hanabusa, for those that support her, talk about style. She showed a fire in the belly that she hasn't shown very much during this campaign. And somewhere in the last week or two, I sense that she's gotten her stride. Is it too late? I don't know that it's a 17-point difference right now, but we had her behind by 5 points just 2 months ago. She has to fight. She has to come out swinging, basically. Schatz has to stay careful. Remember, he's also got a 2-to-1 money advantage as well.
And is it because he has to, some say it's like the elder statesman, even though he's the younger one, that he has to act that way?
Well, he's sitting pretty. He is an incumbent, right? And he's in the U.S. Senate. And if he gets past this, he's in pretty good shape 2 years from now, which is when the race is actually up again. The seat comes up because it's the end of Dan Inouye's term. I don't know if I'm ready to call Brian Schott statesman-like, but certainly he has grown in his position. He definitely has learned from the job, and I think he generally likes being a U.S. Senator.
You know, Schatz has called Hanabusa out on her voting record more than once. What do you make of that? And it, you know, it left sometimes the viewers a little confused on what's the reality.
I have a column that's up, or actually a story that's up this week, on something that didn't come up tonight but came up in all 4 previous debates. And that was a vote that Hanabusa took and a vote that Schatz took, both having to do with entitlements, Social Security and Medicare. And my point, and the point I would make right now, is it's so easy to distort and misrepresent what a congressional vote is all about. Remember the famous John Kerry quote, "I voted for the 87 million before I voted against it." I forget exactly what it was on, but they used that to enforce this idea that he was a flip-flopper. In fact, congressional votes are very complicated things. There's amendments, there's changes in the bills, and so I don't know how, I think it goes over most voters' head. What?
Does the general public really understand that?
I don't think so. Although when Hanabusa was able to make a point about, you know, why didn't you stand up on the pension tax when she was raising Neil Abercrombie, that people can kind of understand. And she was basically saying, you had a chance there to go against your mentor. I don't think Abercrombie is Brian's mentor. But, you know, he could have had a more firm answer, I think, than he did, because he was lieutenant governor. That's tough to separate yourself from.
What do you make of the fact that, you know, Dan Inouye, the chosen successor, and Colleen Hanabusa, and all of this, what do you make of, you know, what both candidates are saying about that?
Well, I think for the people that's an issue that concerns them, they've already decided. Those people aren't reachable anymore. They've decided one way or another. So now the question is, for the people who that's not a major issue, who are they going to vote for?
And do you think that people really care about that?
Some people
do.
Some people clearly do. I think the idea that the AJA bloc is a monolith is not correct. But I think for some people, clearly, this is a concern. And they are going to vote a certain way. The question is, how many of them are there? Polling, I think demographics indicate we are in Hawaii getting older. Mm-hmm. We're getting more Caucasian. And I think we're going to see shifts in voting patterns because of that.
Rosemarie from Liliha brings up Mufi Hanneman. So we're going to go back to the governor's race a little bit. What do you think of Mufi Hanneman's chances? And, you know, everyone's doing the potential matchups. Mufi Hanneman, Duke Iona versus either Abercrombie, Ige. What do you think of Mufi's chances?
Okay. Well, there's 2 theories on this. One is that Mufi was a Democrat, so he will therefore take away votes from Abercrombie. The other theory is that there's a big anti-Abercrombie vote out there, and Mufi will simply split this with Duke. And so which one of those theories is true will decide the election. I tend to believe the latter. I tend to believe that Duke's and Mufi running at the same time will guarantee Neil's reelection.
Do you think there will be this crossover vote, Chad?
You mean in the primary?
In the primary.
I don't think so. I think you have a lot of strong candidates running. Charles DeJoux, Duke Iona. You saw Elwin and Kimo here for lieutenant governor. You know, they don't historically cross over that much. Maybe for someone like Ed Case, and maybe for Mufi Hanneman, but he never was able to really get past the primary. Although he did once against Neil Abercrombie way back when a congressional seat opened up. I don't think it's as much of a factor. I think going into the general, remember, it might also be Ige Satsui or Ige He, and that could make a difference as well. Clayton He is the guy that shepherded same-sex marriage legislation. That could be a factor. What is fascinating is if Abercrombie gets through, he's facing the same 2 guys that he faced just 4 years ago, except all 3 of them were on the same ticket. What happens in a 3-way? I'm with John. My guess is that Democrats will probably carry the day.
And that seems to be the story. I mean, do Republicans have a chance in the state?
I do. I think they do. I just made a prediction, and I said I would make a prediction. Let me backpedal on that one just a little bit and say Duke Iona and Mufi Hanneman, I think, are very appealing candidates. And we've had 4 years of Neil Abercrombie, and I think they're going to be giving them a second look. And I would point to that same-sex marriage vote as something that could be critical. Remember, the U.S. Senate might fall to Republicans, and you have 2 chambers in Congress. You have a lame duck Obama for another 2 years. So, yes, obviously Republicans can win. Linda Lingle won 2 4-year terms.
Yeah. I think the Republican with the best chance is obviously Charles DeJoux. He's been in that seat before. He got within single digits of Colleen for CD1, who I think is a stronger candidate than anyone out of the pack that emerges there. He'll be well-financed. I think the fatal flaw there might be I don't see him getting any RNC money. They have the House. They're going to go for the Senate. And the Democrats are going to fund whoever it is that emerges out of that huge pack of Democrats that wants that CD1 seat. But will he be formidable in the general? Absolutely. Could he win? Yes. If you want to bet behind a Republican to get a seat, I would bet on Charles.
You know, the interesting thing about Charles DeJoux is he's obviously fiscally conservative, but on the social issues, he's pretty moderate. So do you think that his problem, or that it could be just he has an R by his name because we are a Democratic state?
Well, you know, quite a few Republicans have shifted to the Democratic Party in order to get elected. Fact of life.
Chad?
Well, I'll say this. Charles DeJoux, one of perhaps his best argument for electing him to Congress again, remember he just served, 7 or 8 months back in 2010, is certainly the House is going to stay under the control of Republicans. So who do you want in Hawaii? Who do you want to send to Washington? Someone who's a Republican who can work with John Boehner and Kevin McCarthy, the guy that's replacing Eric Cantor, or do you want a Democrat, a Donna Kim or a Mark Takai or a Stanley Ching or whoever? It's a pretty good argument that sending a Republican would be in our best interest. We've sent Republicans to Congress before. Pat Psyche, although very moderate on social issues, pro-choice and so forth, and Hiram Fong, we sent him to the U.S. Senate.
Chad, you mentioned that congressional race, District 1, 7 candidates running. How is the voter supposed to decide? Really?
Well, first of all, my compliments to you, Mahea. Taking on all 7 of them the other night, not an easy thing to do.
No, not easy at all.
You really need 90 minutes, and it's just a very difficult thing. And not only that, you need more of these debates. This is really the stealth election. You've got a high-profile governor and Senate race, and the LG race has now become high-profile. But in fact, we have an open congressional seat here, and we're not giving enough attention. There's just one more televised debate. How do you possibly entertain 7 candidates and get substantive, meaningful answers from them? It's very challenging.
Well, the polls, some polls showing that Senator Donna Mercado Kim in the lead with Mark Takai nipping at her heels. Do you think that she is standing out at this point in terms of the debates or the forums, or who do you think is standing out?
Well, I think
Go ahead, John.
She was the front runner before. I think she remains the front runner. I think the challenge at the end of the day is that there needed to be a coalescence behind anyone but Donna candidate. I don't think that happened. I think there was a somewhat of a shift to Mark. Whether or not that's enough, I'm not sure. I was very disappointed that the Chamber of Commerce decided that there was not enough interest on their members to have a CD1 debate. I also question whether or not having 7, 9, 12, whatever it is, people is a proper debate. I would suggest we look at the League of Women Voters, who uses a criterion of can possibly get elected, and therefore get maybe down to 2 or 3 candidates, maybe Donna, Mark, and Stanley, and have a debate. I think although other people who are not in that would be disappointed, I think that would be a more functional debate.
Chad, they're all Democrats. Are they really standing out on any of the issues?
Well, certainly when it comes to same-sex marriage, Donna Kim remains opposed to that. She says she'll accept civil unions, but Mark Takai and Willis Sparrow, both previously opposed to that, came around. So there's a very clear difference. Right here at this table, if I remember correctly, she expressed a different view on the Hawaii Health Connector and getting a waiver from Obamacare. I believe the other 6 were generally in support of the ACA. So I think you have seen some distinctions. That's why you do need to have all 7 of them meet more to let the voters decide. Donna Kim probably is the the favorite candidate for a number of reasons. She's been in politics a long time. She has high name recognition. But there's 30% of those people are undecided. The money is what's
John
probably
doing the little money sign
thing.
here.
Yeah. Well, give Mark Takai and Stanley Chang some credit. They've definitely picked up the fundraising pace, and you're seeing, I don't think Chang has ran more than one ad, but Takai has ran a couple, and Kim has as well. So in many ways, it's really coming down to these three. Can Nakaika Anderson somehow close the gap? One other thing about CD1, still about a third of the electorate, the last time I looked at the polls, undecided on who they're going to pick in what we call the CD1.
John,
This is certainly not the CD1 race we thought we would see several years ago. I mean, when we thought about, where was the ultimate, Case, Lingle, Hanneman, big heavyweight fight we would see. Yeah, and we never saw that. And interestingly enough, in an alternative universe, had someone like a Mufi Hanneman or an Ed Case decided to enter CD1 at the last minute, they possibly could have, based on name recognition, claimed 20%. Instead, we have a very different race than anyone would have guessed several years ago.
all right, so if you could make a prediction in that race, John?
CD1 today.
CD1 today,
Donna
right
Kim.
now, Donna Kim. And I didn't hold you on the other one, the U.S. Senate race between Colleen Hanabusa and Brian Schatz. What do you think?
I think that's a very difficult call. If you gave me odds, I might move around. I would say if I have to go black or red on the wheel, it would be Schatz. If you gave me odds on Hanabusa, I might be tempted to take it.
Chad, you talk to a lot of the insiders and their press people and their PR people. In terms of the U.S. Senate race, in terms of the governor's race, no one's feeling really comfortable right now, right?
Well, let me tell you, Neil Milner, who I know you've interviewed a long time, John knows him, and he wrote a column for Civil Beat this week, and he basically says, look, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be Abercrombie. It's probably going to be Schatz. Yeah. I don't know if he said Kim, but he said DeJoux is going to be someone to contend with. And he basically said nothing major is going to change come August the 10th.
It's all on the Democrat side. That's what he said.
Pretty much, yeah. Although with the possibility that DeJoux might be able to pull something out on a one-on-one.
But we can't agree with that, or else we wouldn't be here right now, right? We might be talking about why Johnny Winter passed away.
That's true. Great blues legend.
What are the hot races right now on the state side? Do you think anyone's coming really close? I know there's no real polling on this, but what is your perspective, Chad?
You got to wonder whether Faye Hano is going to be able to fend off, I believe, 3 or 4 Democrats in her race in Puna. My guess, with name recognition, she'll have a good advantage. I think Cynthia Phelan, a Republican who's really quite moderate over there on the windward side, is facing Joan Hood, a pastor, one of these people that is using the same-sex marriage issue as something to run on, and Cynthia is voted for same-sex marriage. So there's a couple of good races.
The one I would add is Clayton He giving up his seat opens that up, and I think that's
Richard Foley, Colleen Meyer, Gil Revere for the Senate now, the state Senate. So there's a lot of them that have kind of been overshadowed. Important races on the primary. Most will be decided in the general election, but a couple of people will be out of business come August the 10th.
Office of Hawaiian Affairs, you have some candidates who have high name recognition, like Mahealani Trask, but others not so known. Is it a matter of just, I know you, so I'm going to vote for you at the end of the day?
Well, it's certainly become different since we've decided that, or a court decided that everyone can vote on this. I think Trask has huge name recognition. I think it would be extremely interesting to see her in there. I think the possibility of a discussion as to whether or not Hawaiians or Japanese run OHA would be a very interesting one.
Chad, I know that we had a discussion earlier, and you wanted to bring up a point about our national issues and some of the international crisis that our nation is facing right now, and where the candidates are standing on this.
One quick thing on OHA, there's actually a primary for OHA this year, and that has really opened things up. So we'll see if we get some new faces in there. Mahealani Trask actually served on OHA before. It came up during the Senate debate earlier on Hawaii News Now tonight, the situation in Iraq, or Syria and Iraq, and Colleen Hanabusa really hammered away at Schatz, suggesting that he's kind of going along with Obama's policy in that regard. You also saw for the first time the issue of Israel and Gaza being brought up, with the ground invasion now having begun there. Another issue that did not come up, my God, a plane was shot out of the air today over Ukraine, potentially the rebels there on the eastern side. I don't know if we found out who's done that yet, whether Russia did or, well, I guess we could probably guess.
There's a lot of theories
Oh,
on
there's
there
so
right
many
now.
things going on internationally. It's just, it's kind of been quiet for most of this this race, particularly in the congressional races. I wonder if we might see more of that. Hanabusa in particular has been pushing the Iraq situation.
What about voter turnout? I mean, we have, what, the worst turnout in the nation. How do people get excited about the primary? I know people in the media and everyone who's really into politics is watching every single debate and reading every newspaper, but it's the primary. You know, some people just, it's a Saturday.
Oh, it is. I think we should switch it to not be a Saturday. I think we're only one of 2 states, maybe 3, that has something not only on a Saturday, but it's on the second week of August when so many people are gone. You know, school hasn't started up. So I think that's something that could really change. We'll get a sense from the state elections, the county offices, the clerks next week on whether registration numbers up and whether people that have chosen absentee ballots are up as well, and that will be an indication. But we won't know whether we get above that, what is it, 41%? Is that the current turnout rate until the primary?
Well, the betting is obviously that more and more people are going to vote absentee. That's why these debates, interestingly enough, end when the absentee ballots
Which is
come
this
out.
week, yeah.
This
They have to
week.
do it sooner,
Yeah,
right,
and their
right.
buying patterns for ads have changed now, because rather than just getting action on a certain date, you need to have action for the whole month. So you need more saturation ads, you need to spend more money, huge change in the amount of ads you buy and how you buy them. And certainly when we have issues like we had last year of I had to wait 2 hours and you ran out of ballots, that's just going to
Well, we're
encourage
gonna get
more and more
bombarded
absentee
by those
balloting.
political ads. John Hart and Chad Blair, it's been great to talk to you tonight,
Thanks,
and we'll be seeing you guys again soon, really shortly,
I'll
I'm
wear
sure.
a nicer shirt.
Well, next time
I'll wear
on
a seatbelt.
Insights, a week from tonight, we'll hear from Tracy Arakaki and Arnold Wong, 2 of 3 Democratic candidates hoping to fill the open State House District 33 seat. Incumbent Representative Mark Takai is vacating the IAEA seat in his bid for the U.S. Congress. Then we'll talk with Democratic candidates for the Waianae Coast Senate District 21, incumbent State Senator Maile Shimabukuro and former State Representative Michael Kahikina. That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Mahealani Richardson. Ahui ho.